Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez. I hope you guys had a fantastic Halloween. For those who have been following along, our Haunted America series has just wrapped up, and it was an incredible journey through some of the most haunted locations across America. But now that the series has concluded, we're shifting back to our usual content, bringing you all things Halloween, creepy stories, and urban legends to keep that spooky feeling alive all year round. And just as a little side note, I am going to Tulsa this weekend, and while I'm there, I'm going to go to some of the locations that I actually talked about. So make sure, if you're not on that Facebook page, go now, facebook.com/the Halloween Podcast. I'm going to be posting some pictures there and maybe do some videos. I might even do a special episode or something to that effect, but I'm going to go to the Belvedere Mansion. I'm going to go to the Gilchrist Museum is not open, but I'm going to drive by the location to see if I can catch a glimpse of it, and Kane's Tavern. Those three places are where I'm going to go, and hopefully I can get in without any issues. The Belvedere Mansion for sure, we're going to go, and we're going to spend an hour or two walking around in there and see if I can drum up some more ghost stories. But yeah, for this episode, we're just going to go right back to the regular programming. And if your Halloween was anything like ours, you're probably a little bit bummed because we actually got rained out. But hey, we managed to still make an effort, and we went to a few houses before the rain really started, and then we had to just head home. But tonight, we are diving into one of the most chilling legends in modern paranormal lore, the Black-Eyed Children. So get comfortable, maybe dim those lights a little bit, and get ready for a story that just might make you think twice about answering the door late at night. So what exactly are Black-Eyed Children? The legend goes that these kids, usually between ages 6 and 16, appear on doorsteps, in parking lots, and sometimes even on lonely highways. They look almost normal, dressed in clothes that seem just a bit out of place, sometimes even outdated. They ask for help, a ride, or even a place to stay. Whatever they have to say to get inside. But it's their eyes. Their eyes are solid black. No whites, no pupils, just a dark void. Those who encounter them often feel a wave of intense fear, an instinct to just get away. And if that wasn't unnerving enough, they seem to need permission to enter or interact, almost as if they're bound by some strange rule of etiquette from another world. Tonight, we're going to talk about some of the most chilling Black-Eyed Children encounters ever reported. These accounts come from people who shared their stories online, some of which have been passed down since the 1990s. Whether or not you believe in their existence, one thing's for sure, these stories are creepy and they seem to follow a familiar, unsettling pattern. Our first account is probably the most famous. This one comes from Brian Bethel, a journalist in Abilene, Texas. He claims to have had a first-hand encounter back in 1996. It's late at night, and Brian is parked outside a movie theater, filling out a check by the glow of his car's interior light. All seems normal until there's a knock on the window. He looks up and sees two boys standing there. They're young, maybe 9 or 10, dressed in hooded sweaters. One of the boys tells him they need a ride and that they forgot their money at home and want to get it to go watch a movie. Brian begins to feel uneasy. A deep, unsettling fear creeps over him as he listens to their strangely formal speech. The boys insist, almost as if they're reading from a script, and that they need to get in the car. Then he notices their eyes, completely black, void of any whites or pupils. The sight jolts him, and he feels a wave of terror. Before he knows it, he drives away, leaving the boys behind. Brian later recounts the story on an online paranormal forum. This post sparked countless discussions. To this day, it remains one of the earliest and best known encounters with black-eyed children, and Brian says he remembers that night clearly. Our next story takes us to a quiet, snowy night in Vermont, to a home of an elderly couple living alone in a rural area. Picture it, a small house surrounded by snow-covered trees, the sound of a fierce winter wind howling outside. The couple is settled in for the night, watching the snow fall from the warmth of their living room, when suddenly there's a loud knock at the door. They open the door, and standing there are two children, a young boy and girl, dressed in light clothing, as if they hadn't realized it was freezing outside. The children look up, and the couple is struck by the innocence of their faces and the way they're shivering against the bitter cold. The girl speaks first, softly but with an oddly faint tone. "Can we come in? We're cold." The couple is hesitant, but the children's shivering and sad expressions pull at their hearts. They invite the children inside, letting them sit on the couch near the warmth of the fireplace. But as soon as they do, something shifts. The house suddenly feels darker, colder, and there is an almost oppressive silence hanging in the air. The woman notices that the children aren't looking at anything, just sitting there perfectly still, hands on their laps, as if waiting. She offers them something to drink, but they don't respond. And when her husband joins them, he sees it. Their eyes, both of them black as coal, staring back at him. In that instance, the man feels an overwhelming terror. The children's expressions are blank, emotionless, and it feels like they're watching them, like almost assessing them. Then suddenly, as if on cue, one of the children looks up and says, "Our parents are here." The couple turns to look out the window, and in the snow-covered darkness, they see two figures standing at the edge of their driveway. Tall, unmoving shadows. The children get up, walk to the door, and vanish into the snow with those figures. The couple is left in stunned silence, and afterward, they start experiencing a string of bad luck. Illnesses, accidents, and even the mysterious death of one of their pets. Whether it's coincidence or something more, they can't shake the feeling that the children left something dark and chilling inside their house that night. Our next encounter takes us to a desolate stretch of farmland in Idaho, where a farmer is doing his routine late-night rounds, checking in on his livestock. It's a quiet, moonlit night, the kind where every sound seems amplified, and he's walking along the fence line when he spots something in the distance. At first, he thinks it's just a shadow or a trick of the light, but as he gets closer, he realizes it's a child, a young boy standing perfectly still by the fence, staring out at the field. The man approaches slowly, calling out, "Are you lost?" But the boy doesn't answer. He's just standing there, his head slightly tilted, staring at something only he can see. When the man gets close enough, the boy finally turns and looks at him, and his heart skips a beat. The child's eyes are pure black, absorbing all light, deep and endless. The boy doesn't move, doesn't speak, just watches him with those unsettling empty eyes. The man feels an intense wave of dread, like he's standing in the presence of something unnatural. He backs away slowly, keeping his eyes on the boy. But when he glances away for just a second, the boy is gone, vanished into thin air. The man returns home, feeling shaken and disturbed. For days afterward, he can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. He describes it as a dark presence lingering around his property, leaving him with an unshakable sense of dread every time he steps outside. Now that we heard a few encounters about the black-eyed children, let's talk about some of their cultural connections. In Japan, for instance, there's a spirit known as the teke-teke. This figure is a ghostly apparition that sometimes appears in the form of a young girl with dark, piercing eyes. While her legend doesn't mirror the behavior of black-eyed children exactly, her unnaturally dark eyes and the fear she inspires resonates with the same sense of dread. Stories of dark-eyed spirits are often tied to those who were wronged in life or met with a tragic fate, and their eyes are thought to reflect the darkness of their souls or the anger they carry. And let's not forget about European folklore, where black eyes have long been linked to supernatural beings or the infamous evil eye. This curse is believed to bring misfortune and illness to those who encounter it, a belief that has persisted across many cultures. In some traditions, people with unusually dark or soulless eyes were seen as having a direct connection to the spirit world, or worse, to dark forces. And those eyes were thought to be a warning sign to others. Even in ancient Mesopotamian texts, we find references to figures described as soulless, with eyes like empty voids. In these stories, these eyes weren't just a physical feature. They symbolized a being without humanity, something otherworldly and dangerous. It's fascinating and a little terrifying to see how these creatures with dark, empty eyes appear again and again, as if they touch on a universal fear that we all share, regardless of the culture. Now let's take a look at some of the scientific theories behind why black-eyed children encounters might feel so terrifying. Why does the sight of these children, especially their pitch black eyes, trigger such a powerful response? Psychologists suggest that black-eyed children tap into something called the uncanny valley, a concept where things that look almost human but have a slight abnormality might trigger intense discomfort. Seeing eyes that are entirely black and devoid of any lifelike quality taps into an instinctual fear, one that signals something is terribly wrong. It's a warning signal built into our instincts. Others believe it could be related to hallucinations or even sleep paralysis, a condition where the brain is half awake, half dreaming, often accompanied by visual hallucinations. People alone or in dark, isolated places may unconsciously project their fears onto ordinary situations, creating these versions of dark-eyed figures as a way to cope with deep-seated anxieties. But is that all it really is? A manifestation of our own fears? What's even stranger about black-eyed children encounters is what comes afterward. Witnesses report that once the fear of the initial encounter wears off, something lingers. Many say they experience unusual levels of anxiety, as if they're being watched. Some even describe reoccurring nightmares featuring black-eyed figures, and in some cases, a strange run of bad luck follows. A pet that suddenly becomes ill, a series of small accidents, or electronic devices acting up. These symptoms are hard to explain. Is it merely the after effect of such an unsettling experience? Or could these dark-eyed figures be leaving behind something much more sinister? So let's say you're listening to the Halloween podcast late at night. You've heard these stories, and now you're thinking, what if? What if tonight is the night you hear that soft, persistent knock on your door? Don't worry, because we got you covered with a few handy tips on how to avoid an encounter with black-eyed children. After all, it's always good to be prepared. Tip number 1. Ignore late-night knocks. I know, curiosity can get the best of us, but when it's after dark and you're not expecting company, it's probably best to let the doorbell or knocking go unanswered. Trust me, it is important. They'll knock again. Unless, of course, it's a black-eyed child. Then, it's better to just leave it alone entirely. Tip number 2. Look before you open. If you absolutely have to check who's at the door, use that peephole. And here's a rule of thumb. If they're standing unusually still with their heads down, and especially if they're children dressed in odd or outdated clothing, maybe just pretend you're not home. Tip number 3. If you see black eyes, it's time to go. This is the ultimate telltale sign. No whites in their eyes, just a solid black void. You don't need any more proof. Close the door, lock it, and maybe even light a candle and say a quick prayer, because whatever it is on the other side of that door is definitely not your average trick-or-treater. And finally, tip number 4, trust your instincts. If you feel that deep, unexplicable sense of dread, listen to it. People who've encountered black-eyed children say that they feel an overwhelming sense of fear, even before noticing the eyes. Our instincts are there for a reason. And in cases like this, they're probably right. So there you have it, your little survival guide for black-eyed children. Keep these tips in mind, and hopefully you'll never have to use them. But remember, if you ever do, just be careful what you wish for when you answer that late-night knock. And with that, that brings us to the end of the episode. So what exactly are black-eyed children? Are they manifestations of deep-seated fears, paranormal beings, or simply a modern urban legend that feeds on our instincts? Whatever the truth may be, their stories have captivated our imaginations and left a haunting mark on those who claim to have encountered them. Next time you're alone and you hear a knock late at night, remember these stories. And also, remember the tips I gave you. It might just be your imagination, or it might be something waiting for permission to come inside. And that's going to do it for our episode on the legends of the black-eyed children. Not too much on this one. I thought for sure when I first heard about the black-eyed children, I was going to find a lot of encounters, a lot of creepy information, but there really wasn't that much. I tried looking. I was able to find some more encounters, but I picked the 3 that I thought were the coolest, and I kind of put in my own little flair into them. And then I tried something new, giving tips and tricks on how to avoid the black-eyed children. Hopefully I made you laugh a little bit. If you're enjoying the Halloween podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on either Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you haven't subscribed, please do it right now. Just hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the episodes that come out from the Halloween podcast. Yes, I believe this is our first show after Halloween, and we do celebrate Halloween all year round here on the Halloween podcast, so expect a new episode every single week. A lot of different Halloween topics, a lot of creepy topics, a lot of other cool Halloween goodness. You don't want to miss out, so hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, comments, or want to suggest anything for a future show, send me an email, thehalloweenpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I am looking for guests, so if you want to be on the Halloween podcast, you think you'll be a good fit, send me an email, let me know a little bit about yourself, what you want to talk about, and I'll see about getting you on the show. And if you'd like to support the Halloween podcast, head on over to our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Go to our merch store, order some merch. I'll get that stuff out to you. And I got some postcards, some stickers. I've had some people that want me to sign some stuff, and I did. So if you want me to sign anything, just let me know. I'll sign a postcard. You can put it on your wall. Show your support to the Halloween podcast. And let's not forget about that Facebook page, facebook.com/the Halloween podcast. I really meant to get this episode out last week, but I ran out of time. So you did hear me mention that I was going to go to Tulsa. I actually already went to Tulsa, and I just came back to finish up this episode. So go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/the Halloween podcast. I went to a few different haunted locations that I talked about during Haunted America. I went to Kane's Ballroom. That was one. The Gilcrease Museum, or at least what was there. It was kind of fun. We were driving around trying to figure out how to get as close to the museum as possible. But there was a lot of signs of trucks only and all of that stuff, construction. And it was the weekend, so there wasn't really many people around. But I was able to get a picture of it from far away. And also, we ended up going to the Belvedere Mansion, which was a lot of fun. I did a live while I was there. I think I did 2 lives, one inside, one outside. And you can see me walking around and stuff in there. So make sure you go to the Facebook page and check those out. All right, so thank you guys so much for listening. And until next week, I will see you later. Have a good night.